Hello, Julie from Technique Tuesday here. Today I'm working on our new Luscious Grapes stamp set. I'm going to be using my fancy schmancy watercolor markers. I got these for my birthday and I love them. So I'm going to use many of the colors in stages. My plan is to make the grapes the color of Concord grapes, which is mostly blue with a hint of purple. So I'm going to start out with the blue. These have two ends, a brush tip and a fine tip. I like the brush tip for this kind of work just because it's a little bit more flexible and the tip of the brush is really fine, which is great for getting into the small spaces. I'm going to put a swoosh of color in the bottom of each of these grapes. So this is Canson watercolor paper, and I've stamped my image using a quick drying waterproof ink. I like this paper because with these watercolors, I can put down my color first and go back in with my brush like this and drag my color over into the rest of the space. I found that Canson watercolor paper works best for me, but you should experiment and see what you like. Once I've got the blue spread through the grapes, I'll go back in and add just a tiny spot of purple for the highlight. And as usual, I'll go back and forth between colors and add more of the blue just to intensify that color so it's a bit darker. See, you can see this great sort of gradient going because you're doing essentially wet on wet watercoloring. And I'll keep going on that until I've got all the grapes done, and it looks a bit like this. Then I'm going to go in on the leaves. With these leaves, there's a lot of detail in here that could get lost. So I'm going to try to make sure that where the leaves overlap, the bottom leaf is a bit darker than the part of the top leaf that's covering it, just so I can get that difference and it's a bit easier to see. That means I'll probably end up going in with color several times. I'm going to start out with yellow. I'll add sort of a base layer. I'm going with an autumn leaf color scheme here, like the grapes are just ready to be picked, so the colors are generally warm. And the base for that can be a nice yellow. I'm just going to start to go around the edges and along the veins, so I'm not overwhelming it with yellow color, but just giving it that base, trying to make sure there will be color everywhere. And then I'm going to use my brush to spread it around a bit, so I get some nice gradients. Now, one problem with most inks, even waterproof inks, is that they will often spread into colors, especially yellow, and get a touch muddy. I haven't found one that's absolutely perfect yet. However, because I'm going to be adding other colors, this isn't terribly concerning. In the spots that get a little muddy, I can add some orange, red, or even green. So I'll do that until I've got it all spread through the leaves. The color isn't perfectly even, but I made sure that it's in most of the areas. And now I'm going to go in with the orange, or rather cadmium red, which is about as orange as I'm going to get with this set. And I'm just going to pick out a few spots to make a reddish orange. In this leaf area, I want to make sure there's going to be contrast. I'm going to use color to make that contrast as well as the intensity. So I'll probably put green on the leaf that's underneath, and this will get much redder. They're complementary colors, so the difference will make them pop. I've got a good bit of the orangey red in, so I'm just going to start mooshing it around. I'll probably add more of the color, possibly more yellow as I go. Now I'm going to go in with the red, or rather alizarin crimson hue, as opposed to the cadmium red hue, which is a bit oranger. This one is a bit more red, possibly a little more blue in it. And I'm going to add a little more intensity to the areas I've already got headed in the reddish-orange direction. Now I'm going to add a bit of green, sap green. I'll pick a few spots. This is one where I have to be a bit careful about where I add it. I want to make sure I don't add it to the areas that already have red in them, since if they mix, they'll turn into a muddy brown because they're complementary colors, which means they're on opposite sides of the color wheel and will create a neutral color when mixed. Here's where I'm going to go in very carefully and add that bit of green for the contrast. And now I'll pull the green around with my water brush. And I'll go back and forth between the colors to get the leaves exactly how I want them. Next to the stem is the stem, or vine, which I'm going to use a couple of browns for. I'll start with the lighter color, and I'm just going to go in along the top side and spread it down a little bit. And now, because it's pretty wet here, this dark brown is going to go in like a dream and spread itself out a bit. And then I'll mess with it to get it exactly where I want it to go. This is another case where I want to make sure there's a good contrast between the stem and the leaf, so you can tell they're different bits. I'm gonna go back in and add some more color in a few places, and eventually it'll turn into something like this, all nice and dark. I've added some darker green here on top of the lighter green to pump up the contrast, but this is the only place I use the dark green color. And this is my final piece. Thanks for watching.